And when my mother found out that 8-year-olds would be compensated to the tune of $5 per month, she thought it would be a good idea for us to join the Trinity Church and allow me to sing in the choir, and subsequently David and subsequently Doug. Now, when I referred on the reverse side of this tape to, I couldn't remember whether I spent 6 full years at Lincoln Annex. It's very apparent that I didn't. The town must have started growing, and the upshot of the whole thing, that by the time I was 8 years old, which I would have been in the probably the 3rd grade at that time, I was at Lincoln School. Now, back to the choir, and why I remembered that is because we had to be at choir practice Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from like 4 until 6 or 4 until 5 or some such, probably 5. So I would leave Lincoln School and walk up to Kenmore Avenue, where I would catch a Kenmore Avenue bus, and the cost at this time was 3 cents. And I would then get a transfer from the Kenmore Avenue bus to the Delaware Avenue bus, and take the Delaware Avenue bus down to Tupper Street and get off there, go across the street, and sing in the choir. Now, this was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Did I mention that the fare was 3 cents? So it cost me 3 cents down and 3 cents back, so it cost me 9 cents a week. So I still made a profit, I guess. But my mother was very, very money conscious and wanted her boys to be involved in things where they could put a couple nickels in their pockets, and we did. So what happened the first day that I was to go down, I think Philip Harold, who was a year older than I, and I left Lincoln School and walked over to Kenmore Avenue, he being my mentor and going to show me the ropes of how to get to Trinity Church. Now, at 8 years old, this big wide world was enormous to me. So we took the bus up to Delaware Avenue, took the Delaware Avenue bus down to Tupper Street, got off, went across, and we practiced. Well, we not only practiced Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, but on Sunday morning, I think the service was probably at 11, and so we had to be there at 10. I'll get into more of that later. But this episode occurred. Now, Phil, either to be a smart ass or whatever have you, and me not knowing the ropes, when we left choir practice, we ran like the devil. They did. And I toddling along behind at 8 years old, got to the bus stop a little bit later than they did. Well, the boys that were going north jumped on the bus, paid their 3 cents, and off they went. Well, there I am, standing there with my mouth hanging open and my 3 cents in my pocket, and wasn't sure where to go or what to do. I proceeded to take the next bus with a familiar sounding name, Colvin. So what I did was get on the bus. Now it's dark. I think this was probably in the fall. And the bus was crowded. These were people that were going north after work. And so, as I say, it was crowded, and I'm standing on the bus, and I can't see out, and I don't know if I could see out, I could see any landmarks or know what I was doing anyhow. So we went down Delaware, and then we turned right on Amherst Street. And in those days, the bus driver would call out the names of the streets. And when we got to Colvin, right there by the zoo, he called out Colvin. Well, that was familiar sounding name. So I pulled the cord and opened the door, and out I went. Well, there I stood. I don't think it was snowing, but I think it was in the fall. And I knew I was in the wrong location, but I wasn't sure where. But I guess I had some common sense enough to know that I ought to be walking north. So I started walking north from Amherst Street and crossed Hurdle and then crossed Kenmore Avenue and kept on going and so on. And either Mr. Harold or my dad or mother would pick us up at Colvin and Highland, because there was a little drugstore there or some such facility where we could come in out of the cold. Well, you can imagine, here's my parents and Philip Harold and company get off the bus. Well, where's Donald? Well, he's probably going to get to the next bus. So I would rather suspect that Philip caught hell for that. But anyhow, I kept walking north and finally got to the location, and here I had frantic parents standing around waiting to find out where their son was, not knowing how to retrieve him. It was quite an experience. And as I look back on it now, or even then, I didn't think much of it. I just kept plodding along and finally got to landmarks that looked familiar, but it would I don't know how in the world long it took to get from Colvin and Amherst to Colvin and Highland. Now, one of the other reasons why Mom could see the advantage of having her boys sing in the choir was that when the summertime, well, we all had brown shoes. Well, Mrs. Green, a wealthy widow, was the choir mother. Well, Mrs. Green, God bless her, went out and bought a whole ton of different size black shoes, because when you wore the cassock and kata, one being black and the other one being white, the black underneath and the white over, waist high over the top, you had to have black shoes. You couldn't have brown shoes. So Mrs. Green bought a whole ton of shoes, and they were in the lockers where you'd change, take your coats and shoes off and put new shoes on, and the the cassock and kata, and then sing in the choir. And you had a big white bow tie on, and there's probably pictures downstairs of me in some kind of a. And I subsequently became, once I finished with the choir and my voice started to change, I became a acolyte and then was promoted to crucifer. So did those chores on Sunday mornings, but not having to sing in the choir. One of the other benefits of being a choir member at Trinity was that, God bless her, Mrs. Green, provided 2 weeks at Camp Weona up on the lake shore around Derby or wherever it might, in the Angola area. And we would go up there and live in cabins, have more activities than you can shake a stick at, whether they be sporting or swimming or, various activities. Had a wonderful time at no cost, because Mrs. Green paid for all of her choir boys to go to camp for 2 weeks during the summer. Have no idea now what it cost, but in those dollars back then, it was probably equivalent to what it would be for 2 weeks away at camp now. But it was something that my mother heard about, liked, got her boys involved, all three. David, to this day, still remains in touch with, I think it was Phil, who lives in West Virginia. went to college there, and is a great athletic supporter for his team, and I can't for the life of me remember, but it doesn't make much difference. But Dave still stays in touch with him and hears from him periodically, and or if he gets down near Dallas or Dave up in West Virginia, why they get together. As a kind of a comical event that occurred while I was a choir member, I was also a member of the local Cub Scouts that also my dad was involved in, my mother was involved in, with other neighbors over at Lincoln Annex. That was a good experience. And at one of the Cub Scout picnics that we had, I was a pretty good eater in those days. Well, it hadn't changed much. But we had hot dogs and hamburgers and corn and potato salad and whatever have you, and this was on a Saturday or a Saturday evening. Well, the following Sunday, Mom and Dad drove me down to sing in the choir. Had to be there somewhat early to practice before the service occurred, and everything was fine. Got into my choir outfit and entered through the side door and walked up the aisle on the side and across the back and then down the center aisle and took our seats up in the sanctuary facing each other, the men, the women, and the boys. It was a pretty good boys' choir. It really was. Had a marvelous choir director. Well, anyhow, halfway through the service, or some part through the service, I could feel this rumbling in my stomach, and I must have either had a slight cold, I must have eaten too much, I must have had too many, I might have got the collywobbles. But nevertheless, I'm standing there not knowing what else to do, and I can feel this rumbling, and all of a sudden, like a shot, out of my mouth comes all of the previous night's food. Well, it had been down there long enough to really mature, and it came like a shot out of, there I am standing there on one side of the sanctuary facing the people on the other side, and this eruption comes out of my mouth, hits the either the hymnal or the piece of music that I was holding in front of me, and probably splashed all over the kids on either side of me, and probably even over the top of the choir chairs. Well, anyhow, they got me out of there, but the service continued, and those poor souls, males, females, and children, had to sit there and smell this eruption that had occurred. I don't think much was ever said. I don't think I wasn't fired. I was kept on. It was just one of those things that happens to a juvenile that you have little or no control over. But I did feel sorry for, as I look back on it, I didn't feel anything at the time. I just got sick, and so now as I look back on it, I do feel sorry. Whether one of the sextons could get out there and pick up some of it or all of it, but I'm sure they couldn't get rid of the smell and the odor. As I've led you to believe before, my folks were thrifty folks. And I think this came from Frank C. Perkins. He was a very thrifty man, and he taught his girls the same, and they carried it on with him. I do remember my dad becoming, because he was a very outgoing at this point, outgoing, gregarious, sales type of individual. He got to know we used to do a lot of shopping down at 998 Broadway. It was called Sadler's at the time. It was a great big, it was almost like what Kmart or Target or Walmart is today to the Buffalo community. Um, in fact, Donald, the desk and chair that you have in your office came from the Sattler, I can't say a garage sale, estate sale. It was owned by the Sattlers, who owned this store down there. Well, anyhow, Dad got to know all the department heads. He made it a point to get to know everybody, and to a point where the department heads, whether it be shoes, whether it be clothing, whether it be suits, be it whatever, they'd give him a call. They'd tell him, geez, we just got a shipment in, some other haberdashery or large organization went bankrupt, or when we bought all the, because it was a thrifty store. It was, they had high-class stuff, almost like the outfit out in Williamsville. What is it? Our customer, our knowledgeable customer is our best, or knowledgeable, customer is our best patron, or whatever it is. Similar to that operation, where you had good clothes coming in, shoes, everything else under the sun. It was an enormous store. But anyhow, Mom and Dad got to know the people, and that's where we did our shopping. And again, my parents, Don and Marion, got to know another person, whether through the Masonic order, or I guess it was. But anyhow, he was a sales representative for Campbell Soup. Well, either in shipping or in transporting in some fashion, some of the Campbell Soup labels would come unglued. So here they had cases of soup that either had been exposed to moisture or to heat or to whatever, takes labels off of cans of soup. And they would, I don't think they gave them away, but they probably sold them at a much, much reduced price. Well, anyhow, you probably never noticed it, but on the bottom, or it used to be anyhow, on the bottom of Campbell Soups are codes. Now, we not only got cases of Campbell Soups where there were no labels on them, but they also had a code, and it was printed up in a 8.5 by 11 sheet, and we had these things down in our old coal bin down at 720 Parkhurst, which was converted from a coal bin to a kind of a fruit cellar. And we had cases upon cases and cans upon cans of soup, and we'd look on the bottom and put them all in a row on a shelf of like kinds of soup. Well, if you wanted a can of soup for lunch or something like that, you could go down to the fruit cellar, look on the sheet, find out what the code was that told you it was cream of asparagus or cream of mushroom or cream of chicken or chicken noodle or whatever it may have been. And you could grab that can and up you went and opened it up, and there you had, well, sometimes the sometimes the label on the bottom didn't coincide. So I, on occasions, would open up a can of celery or some can of asparagus, some soup that I didn't particularly want to eat, but there it was, and I had either misread it or the can was mislabeled or whatever have you. But this, again, was a method for the folks to save some money. Another aside is when I was 6 years old, 1936. You can look in the weather reports if you're so inclined, but you don't need to. You can take my word for it. We had one hellish snowstorm, not dissimilar to the one that Don was exposed to in 1977. Well, we were all exposed to it, but Don carried the brunt of it. But nevertheless, we had, oh, there it goes, nevertheless. we had a ton of snow. Well, this was at a time when, as I say, the end of our street was just 20 yards beyond our driveway. And I can recall, I thought I had a picture, but I've looked all over for it and can't find it, but the snow, either because of the drifting and or because of the plowing right there at the end of our street, allowed me to sit on top of one of the light poles because the snow was piled up that high. And as long as we're on the subject, I can cover another area. I say snow was piled up at the end of our street because it was a dead end and around this light pole that was just beyond our driveway. And during the winter, again, my father being an outgoing, gregarious kind of a guy, when he would be home and he'd see the snowplows come down the street, he'd run to the kitchen, grab a bottle of rye and a couple of shot glasses, and he'd go out and talk to the guys who were doing the plowing. Offer them a shot of whiskey because they were cold. I don't know as they had the heating facilities in the cabs of the snowplows as they do nowadays. But nevertheless, he went out there, befriended them, offered them a shot or more, and they graciously took it. And with that, they didn't just turn around. They turned around by coming up our driveway and plowing because our driveway was fairly long. It was good length from the street up to the house, and then of course next to the house and all the way to the back to the garage that we had in the back. Well, anyhow, they didn't come all the way up there, but they came up far enough so it saved Dad an awful lot of time and trouble and energy plowing the lower end of the driveway. WBEN was functioning well back then, back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and WBEN had a disc jockey like, what's WKBW's disc jockey that's been there forever, Danny Neverth. Well, Clint Buellman was the, I won't say disc jockey, but he played music and would give conversations, and everybody in the world, or everybody in this area, used to listen to him to get the snow reports, and he would give them periodically, just as they do now, as to whether school was open or school was closed and what the prognosis for the balance of the day or week or what have you was. And everybody listened to him. I don't know of any other station that was around. But he was always, he'd always sign off, yours truly, Bewley. And he was kind of an institution in the Buffalo area back in those days. Just as another aside, the telephone, we had telephones, but there were only 6 numbers, or six numbers and or letters. 2 letters followed by 4 numbers, and everybody in different parts of the city had different prefaces of the two letters, and then obviously 4 combinations of numbers. During these earlier years, as I said, there were very few people out on the Woodland Parkhurst area. There was a friend of mine, well, a young boy my age, whose name was Junior Pond, who lived up in between Parker and Loretta on the north side of the street, stone home, double lot. He used to come over to our house and play, or I would go to his house and play. Why I did this, I don't have any idea, but many times I can recall pulling my sled, and at that time, there wasn't an awful lot of traffic on the on Woodland, so I could come down Parkhurst to Woodland and march all the way up to Parker and go to Junior's house and play for a while and have lunch or something like that. This was either on the weekend or snow day or something along that line. Unfortunately, I'll cover this now as opposed to later. Unfortunately, he got into a business where he had in his garage, I think his mother was a widow, and I think it was while I was in Korea that this happened. He had a business where he would, as a roofer of sorts, he had a machine that you'd fire up and it would heat this tank full of tar, and then he'd go put it on the back of his car or truck and off he'd go and tar the roof of some building. And unfortunately, on one occasion, and I found this out after I got home, or maybe I was read it in a letter or an article, that in the garage this mechanism exploded, and he unfortunately was covered with boiling hot tar and must have died a terrible death. It was a sad day when I heard it, either when I got home or while I was overseas. And I believe it was about this time that my mother thought that she had a fixation on keeping her boys busy, either doing things or learning things or what have you. But anyhow, again, through the Masonic order, they had a friend who worked down at a large music store, and if the name comes to me, I'll give it to you. But Denton, Katir, and Daniels, that was it. And they went down there, and they thought it would be a good idea if their oldest son learned how to play the trumpet. Well, when they got down there, either trumpets were in short supply, or the person that was advising them said, I think Donald would be better with a cornet, because it's a softer sounding and not as harsh a musical instrument as the trumpet. So anyhow, I ended up with a cornet. And as many people who play for the Philharmonic in order to increase their income would give lessons. And there was one gentleman that I had as a teacher who lived over in Central Park area, and another one who lived down near Elmwood and Allen later, both of whom played in the Buffalo Philharmonic and taught trumpet. Well, at the beginning, I think I was enthused and had a wonderful time and enjoyed it. But as time went on, other things. I even noticed girls and things that were not conducive to spending a lot of time practicing the cornet. And I'm sure that the teachers could tell when I came for my weekly or bi-weekly lessons that the kid hadn't practiced much, but they weren't about to turn away the $2 or $3, whatever it was that they were paid to teach this person. And I probably conned my mother, but finally gave it up. David ended up with a clarinet, and I think he had about as much interest in the clarinet as I had in the cornet. And whether Doug got involved with an instrument, I don't recall. He being 9 years younger than I, didn't really have much contact with him, and didn't know him very much. Well, growing up. This playing of the cornet led me to another, mid-teen, early teen function. Again, a friend was the director of the American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps. Well, I got involved with the American Legion Drum and Bugle Corps, and I had a uniform, and I think there are pictures downstairs of me in probably a very dark blue pair of trousers with probably a gold stripe down the side and a gold shirt, probably made out of silk or some such material, and one of those caps that has a visor on it and a very, very high, almost like a top hat, with all kinds of ornamentation and whatever have you, and a strap going under my chin, and I think I had a sash going over my, say, left shoulder down to my right. And we used to march in parades on Memorial Day or Labor Day or whatever day or picnic or whatever, any place where a drum and bugle corps needed to add a little liveliness to the function, we'd show up. I don't know whether we were paid anything. I don't think I saw any nickels from that. It was just very enjoyable, and the people along the side, or when you'd play some kind of a tune, and we'd have to go periodically to practice, but it was very enjoyable. But it was an outgrowth of the trumpet playing that I had done. I don't think they ever needed any. I don't think they had any clarinets in this thing, so I don't think David ever got involved in it. While I was at Lincoln School, I can't recall what year it might have been, probably 5th or 6th grade. It was about this time that my dad became involved in the PTA, and he was mightily involved. In fact, I think his involvement in the PTA encouraged him to later on, in the late 40s or early 50s, I think it was the late 40s, to run for the school board with the encouragement of F. Paul Norton, Nick's father, who was the attorney for the school board. But I stray. Being involved in the PTA at Lincoln Elementary School, my dad got to know the principal pretty well, a man by the name of Gordon Haig. And I think he was also a Mason. And a comical thing happened, something that gives you a clue as to my studiousness and attention to schoolwork, was that not paying, and you've probably all heard this story before, not paying very much attention to the teacher. As part of his conversation, part of the teacher's conversation was, he said something before that I wasn't paying any attention to, but all I did hear was that on Mondays you got out of school at 2 o'clock or 2:30, and so I, along with a number of other people, raised their hands, filled out a form, and passed it in. Now that evening, Gordon Haig called my father, and the conversation went something like this: Don, I understand that you're changing religions. And my dad said, gee, no, Gordon, I don't understand what you're saying. No, I don't think we're changing religion. He said, why do you ask? And he said, well, it seems like your son Donald filled out a form so that he could be released on Monday at 2 o'clock or 2:30 and go down to Blessed Sacrament for religious instructions. And of course, all I had heard in the conversation was, you get out of school early. filled out the form, and off we went. Well, the two of them got a big kick out of it, and I think he's probably told that story. My dad probably told that story as often as I have, because it was kind of comical in nature. But no, I did not join the Roman Catholic Church, and I did not go to religious instructions at Blessed Sacrament, but that's the way it is. While I was also at Lincoln School, they had a cafeteria where you could not only bring your lunch, paper bag it, but they also cooked a meal, and they had ice cream, and they had coffee. The teachers or the maintenance people or the students could all eat there. And somehow, some way, and I guess, again, going back to my mother's thriftiness and either creating things for us to do or getting us involved in programs where there were some nickels involved, I got a job in the cafeteria. And you'd get these half-gallon chunks of ice cream, probably Neapolitan or various other shades and colors, and we would have to cut them with a very sharp knife. We'd have to cut them into probably half-gallon, probably into 8 different slices. So I was in charge of cutting ice cream. I also subsequently became the cashier for people coming through the line. I don't think the meals obviously cost very much, but most people that lived in that area brown bagged it. But it was a way for me to get, God bless Mom, it was a way for me to get, for her not to have to pack a sandwich, and for me to eat a meal at lunch, a hot meal, or whatever else I wanted, because I think I don't know whether I was paid much. I think I was probably paid a minimum amount, but then I also got a meal. How I fit all my extracurricular activities that my mother created for me into my schedule probably disallowed me from doing a lot of the studying that I probably should have been doing. But I also got a paper route. Now the paper route, I had to get up fairly early because I was delivering the Courier Express, which came out it was the morning paper, and the Buffalo News was the evening paper. Well, I got a route on Parkhurst and also on Woodland, and it was, I think the paper was 3 cents at the time, and I don't know, we probably got a half a penny or something like that for delivering. But sometimes I would end up the end of the route up near that Presbyterian church up there at the end of Woodland, right near Eggert, and sometimes I'd have papers left over. Either people had canceled the thing and I didn't hear about it, or whatever it might have been. But anyhow, I would go over to the corner of Niagara Falls Boulevard and Sheridan Drive on the northeast corner, because an awful lot of cars came by there. And a lot of the cars that came by there were going to the industrial part of the town of Tonawanda from the Amherst area, or further east. And they'd come by there, and they too were looking for a newspaper to read once they got to work or wherever. So it got to a point where I think I probably still continued to deliver the route, but I began ordering more and more papers, therefore earning more and more money. And it got to a point where I had easily recognizable regular customers, and as I say, if the paper was 3 cents for 5 days, that's 15 cents. A lot of these guys would give me 20 cents or a quarter or something like that on a Monday, and so as not to hold up traffic and to keep things moving, or I would recognize the customer, and they would either pay me individually on the day and or pay in advance. And as they came by, they would roll their window down on the passenger side, and I just flip the paper in and say, "Hi, Charlie," or Sam, or whatever his name was. Many times didn't know their names, didn't much care, but I did recognize the car and was able to throw the paper in the passenger door, and off they went. And this is probably as good a time as any to tell you about my mother and father. My mother enjoyed thoroughly going down to visit her mother. And since we were out in the boonies and there were very little, if any, bus service out this way, my mother retained the car. And my father would walk from our house down Commonwealth or Parkhurst to Harrison, take a right turn to Harrison, and go down to the railroad tracks. Well, there was what they called the high speed, and I think there are pictures of it in the books downstairs, of the trolleys that left Niagara Falls, followed the high speed up through near Maine and Jewett, and right on downtown. I'm sure it was a reasonable cost, but they had a stop there at Harrison and the tracks. Harrison and the railroad tracks, and people would board there or return that way. This allowed my mother to get in the car and go down and have breakfast, lunch, whatever, with her mother, Mary Jenny Perkins. And they were both very devoted to each other. On one occasion, and I think it was probably during the summer, we had a dog by the name of Skippy, and I'll get back to that in a minute. But we had a dog, an occasion for me as a toddler, maybe 4 or 5 years old, to walk with my dad down Parkhurst, hand in hand, and when we got, and Skippy along with us, and when we got to the intersection of Parkhurst and Harrison, my dad said, "Okay, Donald, now you go on home, and I'll go along and catch my trolley and go to work." Well, Skippy didn't understand this conversation that my father was telling me, and he proceeded to start chasing rabbits and pheasants and mice and whatever have you, and ran all over creation in this open field, because that's all it was, until my dad got a good deal of the way towards the trolley, and I started screaming and hollering and crying and whatever have you, and compassionate as he was, turned around. I said, "Skippy is lost. He's not going to, not going to follow me and not going to come home. I've called him and he isn't coming. He isn't doing what I'm told him. Tell him." So my dad, God bless him, he walked all the way back, missed his trolley, assured me that Skippy would find his way home and everything would be fine. I think he either sent me home or walked me home, went on back, caught the next trolley, was late for work, but I couldn't understand why Skippy wasn't doing everything that I told him to do. I sure hope these tapes, looks like we're coming to the end of this, and before I get started on another subject or area, maybe I ought to close it down. Don't know whether this is still, well, it's still recording, but I think we're running out of tape. I guess I'm taping over a previously taped tape. So if I stop talking here, you're going to hear what was under the what was under the other tape. I guess I'm reaching my adolescent years, and I still haven't got to the bulk of what I wanted to tell you guys. I hope it's been somewhat amusing and or revealing about your father and his parents and their parents and what have you. Hope it's of some interest and not as boring as it could be. And if I'd stop sniffling, it would be better too. Maybe I can start another part of my adolescent years and carry it over to the next tape. I also, through my mother, I'm sure, got a job because there was not only a dairy at the intersection of Eggert, Sheridan, and Niagara Falls Boulevard, a dairy, but also a barn where there might have been half a dozen or a dozen ponies. And right on the corner, on the, let's see, southeast corner of Niagara Falls Boulevard and Sheridan, there was a path with fenced-in area where people could come out on a Saturday or Sunday and get a pony ride. And I can't recall how much it cost or whatever have you,